Hi, and welcome to this fifth episode of My Avatar, My Identity. The last 3 months have been quite a handful, I'm sure, and I hope you've taken the time to build resilience of all kinds, physical, mental, spiritual, because these are times when we need that resilience. And the beautiful thing about resilience is that it manifests itself in every aspect of our identity. Speaking of identities, today we have with us a personality who's an amalgam of many different identities. She's an American-born baby boomer, a woman who made India her home, and also the creator of one of Chennai's most famous landmarks, DakshinaChitra. DakshinaChitra is a beautiful heritage museum, one that showcases 18th and 19th century architecture models from all the southern states: Tamilnadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana. Winner of several awards and accolades, I'm delighted to welcome Ms Deborah Thiagarajan, Founder Director of DakshinaChitra Heritage Museum. Welcome, Deborah, to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy.
It's fantastic having you with us. And I'm going to jump right in and ask you this question. If someone had asked you as a young girl that you'd be making a country your home, which is thousands of miles away from where you were born, what would you have said? What would have been your reaction?
Oh, I would have laughed and said, don't be silly. That's not at all on my agenda. I had studied French and German. I was very much involved with Europe, and my horizons didn't go beyond that. So it was, it's quite an unexpected turn in my life, I would say.
Fantastic. And you know, for someone who was brought up in a completely different milieu, you're actually kind of teaching all of us in India what our culture is all about. So I'm going to ask you this question. How did you first experience Indian culture? How did you first experience it?
Well, I think when I moved to Madras in 1970, next door to me was a Veena player. And he had been teaching at the University of Wesleyan. And so I started learning the Veena, not very successfully, I must say. And on the other side was a couple from Coorg. And the TT introduced me to Dr. Malcolm Adesesha of Madras Institute of Development Studies. And so for 1 year, I volunteered there. I was working with data from a survey on Dalits. That brought me into the inequality of India, but I learned a lot through the people who worked at MIDS. So,
okay.
That's my introduction, really.
Okay. How did you feel a sense of belongingness when you came into your Indian family?
Well, I have to admit that it took them 7 years to accept me. And
okay.
The first 2.5 years. I think I was a huge shock to them, much more of a shock to them than India was to me. But I think I knew where they were coming from, so I never took it to heart. And eventually we became, they became reconciled to me, and I think they were very happy with me as a daughter-in-law in the end.
Oh.
My mother-in-law would have loved to have had someone to go to all the pilgrimages and temples with her, which I didn't really do. But otherwise, it wasn't so bad as a daughter-in-law.
When you speak about Indian culture, this thought of, trying to create something like DakshinaChitra, how did that thought occur to you? I mean, you were experiencing culture in one way with a very different, lens, but, making all of us experience it. How did that thought come to your mind?
That was a delayed reaction. After working at MIDS, we moved to Coimbatore. And I was very fortunate. I got a job with the Tamilnadu Nutrition Project. And I had to interview for 3 years. I interviewed women in villages about what they ate when they were pregnant, what they fed their children as infants. And it was there that I was exposed really to Indian culture, to the crafts, to the folk performing arts, and to the generosity of spirit of the villagers. And I would really say that, the heart of India is still in rural India. And that was it was that experience which culminated in DakshinaChitra.
Fantastic, fantastic. Today we find often there is this, the sense of turbulence associated with culture. There's a lot of jingoism. There's a lot of people trying to own the culture. But if you look at the principles of diversity and inclusion, it means that we share culture. We make everybody part of our culture. So how have you been able to do that, with this vehicle of DakshinaChitra?
I would say first, if I look at how I approach culture, I've always been open-minded. I've always not judged. I've always accepted that people are different, but that basically people do things differently, but basically people are the same, that they have the same fears, the same ambitions, the same desires to be loved and to love like that. I think when I started DakshinaChitra, I took a secondary role. I felt, okay, I'm an outsider, so let's have the people decide what they want to see. So I invited people from different communities to say, what would you like? How would you like to have your community shown? How would you like to show how you live?
Okay.
And so they all gave the ideas. And so
okay.
That's how.
That's the most inclusive way in which you could have created DakshinaChitra. That's so beautiful to hear. Today's millennials, they seem to be having a lot of, different ideas about what culture actually is. What would be, a couple of things that you would tell today's millennials or today's, Gen Zs about culture? What is your definition of culture?
I think the first thing I would say is that go into yourself, look at your values that you've been brought up with, because your culture will be embedded in those values. And don't look outside yourself. Don't get tempted by everything around you, but root yourself in your culture, but in the best of your culture. Then I would say the way you can look at your culture is through tolerance. Because when I came to India, I felt there was a much more tolerant environment of people doing different ways, doing different things, believing differently than there is today. And I think tolerance, to understand that there isn't one right way of doing things, but everybody does slightly differently. But again, we're one humanity.
So Deborah, my next question to you is, coming from this amalgam of different identities, you as born, made India your home, what is that which you consider your identity? If somebody were to ask you, who are you? What would your answer be, Deb?
Oh, who am I? That's a very difficult question to answer. I've absorbed a tremendous amount from India and taken it in. I have values from the US. My husband and I used to discuss the fact that both of us were very rooted in our own cultures, but we had no disagreement on values at all.
My final question to you is, if there was any one aspect of Indian culture that really touches your heart, that makes you feel proud that you made India your home, what would that cultural aspect be?
That is certainly the humaneness, the humanity of India, because I don't think there's any other culture that has that close connection, that compassion for other people. And it's sad today to hear about the brutalities which take place, but I realize in rural India that's still there. That's still very much the culture, and I hope it continues because it's very important. It's the key of India, frankly, more than anything else, and that's why my heart has gone to India.
So thank you so much, Deb. It's been fantastic having you on myAvtar, My Identity, and going through the journey of how you actually have made India your home. Thank you so much for sparing time for this show.
Thank you again. I've enjoyed being here, and all good luck to everyone. Thank you. Anyway, this is myAvtar, My Identity, and I wish everyone in the audience a wonderful future during COVID and after COVID, and may India always retain the wonderful sense of generosity and humanity that it has today. Thank you.
And that was a wonderful exchange of thoughts with Ms Deborah Thiagarajan, Founder Director of DakshinaChitra Heritage Museum. She has created an opportunity for all Indians to experience India. And the one omnipotent truth that I took away from this interview with her was that we all may be different with multiple identities, but deep down, the values are the same. Deep down, we all are the same. And humanity is what binds all of us. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.